All right, for this module, we're going to be looking at annotations. So up till this point in time, we've focused a lot in Revit on how to model in 3D, how to edit that model, and then how to cut the model up so that it's displayed in views that we then put on sheets. We've done all of this to prepare to send out 2D documents to, say, a contractor or an owner or a municipality who has to review the building. But everything we've done up till now is just the first half of what it takes to create a set of drawings. We're now going to start focusing on the last half, which is annotating. So you've made all these views, but the views by themselves on a sheet aren't enough to describe to someone how to get it built. So that is the point of annotations. So I'm just going to give you some examples of annotations, and we'll just run through some sheets. So I have open my house plans, and then I also have open the junior high school that we've looked at before. So let's just take a look at, for example, of a floor plan. We've done this before, and I've pointed this stuff out, but I just want to briefly go over it again here. You see there are dimensions, you see there are room tags, you see there are door tags and window tags, and on commercial projects, you can see they look one way, or sorry, on a residential plan, you see they look this way. And then if I went to a floor plan that's a commercial set, like if we look at a window or a door, so the door just has a number, and let's see if we can find a window here. That's the wrong sheet for windows. Let's see. Here's a big window that has like this kind of like stop sign shape, hexagon instead of an octagon. And the doors have like that same shape but elongated. The walls are tagged, which doesn't happen in residential typically, with a square tag. And so you can see everything's a little more cleaner on a commercial set, because on a commercial set of drawings, they're so much bigger and there's so much more information we have to put in. We can't afford to be writing text all over the sheet. So a lot of this ties somewhere else into the drawing. So like if you want to know exactly about this door, there's a sheet that's just dedicated to doors, and you can go look up the number and the size of the door and everything on that sheet, but we don't bother to write that all on the floor plan because that's too much information to display. You'll also notice typically a commercial set, the floor plan scale is 1/8. So it's half the scale of a house plan. So that means everything looks a lot smaller on the sheet in order to show a lot more area of the building on one sheet. So because everything's shrunken down a little bit, we can't take up a ton of room with text. So we abbreviate things a lot more, or we pick tags that reference other things. Whereas if you look in the house plans, the door dimensions are right here. You can see the sill height, you can see how wide it is and how tall it is, and it tells you what kind of window it is. So this is a fixed door, a fixed window, and this is a casement door or window, sorry. And then you can see the same on the doors. The doors are telling you it's 2'6" wide and it's 6 feet 8 inches tall. In the bedroom, the room tag, you can see the name of the room, the square footage, and all of its finishes right here on the floor plan. Again, because we're at twice the scale. So everything's a lot bigger on the sheet than a commercial plan. It's twice as big. So there's a lot more room. You'll also notice the dimensions are on the floor plan, something that was lacking on the commercial set, because on a commercial set, we do a whole set of plans just only showing dimensions. So right here, you'll see this section is the floor plans. Up here are the dimension plans. And the intent here is this whole sheet, the only reason it exists is just to dimension everything. Because if we try to put these dimensions on the same sheet with all the other information that I just showed you, it would be so crowded and difficult to read. Residential, they don't tend to care about that as much. They just put they cram as much on one sheet as possible. Some architects that are residential will separate in between floor plans and dimension plans, but a lot of them put them all together. And then what's even crazier is sometimes, let me show you an electrical plan. Sometimes residential architects also put the electrical plan on the floor plan. So they add one more layer of information. Let me find my electrical plan right here. So they would also try to put all of the light fixtures and all of the outlets and all of the switches. They would add that to that sheet we were just looking at. And then it becomes even busier. So I'm just telling you these things so that when you start to enter into the real world and you see sets of plans, different people do things differently. Commercial is different than residential. And even among residential, you're going to find different ways of doing things. So I just kind of want to expose you to all of these ideas so that you understand. Okay, so those are some examples of annotations on a floor plan. We talked about the tags and the dimensions. Something else you might notice that is pretty common on all sheets is there's what's called general notes. And the general notes change between sheet types. So for example, all floor plan sheets would have the same general notes. And they just talk about things about the floor plans, right? So it talks about where dimensions are dimensioning from. It talks about garage floor slopes in here. Just general notes that apply to floor plans. Then there's typically a section called sheet notes, and these have specific numbers, and then they coordinate with these callouts over here. So if we looked at 1.61, it says floor to ceiling glass shower barrier. So it's just trying to tell you what things in the drawings are. It's just to call things out that are specifically in the view on this sheet. Then there's usually a couple legends. So here we have the finish legend, which tells you what these abbreviations mean that you find at the tags. So the floor in the office is LVT. So if I look over here under floor finishes, LVT, that's luxury vinyl tile. CRPT would be carpet, and so on and so forth. So, and then you also have a legend for just symbols. So here's what a doorbell looks like, a thermostat, a hose bib, all of that gets called out here. We also have a wall legend to tell you how the walls are built. So 2x4 stud framing, 2x6 framing, concrete with a furring, all of that. Then we even have some notes talking about insulation. Then down at the bottom, what's typically included would be a north arrow. This is a symbol annotation. And then we won't go over this in this class, or we won't create these in this class, but there's elevation markers to show what elevation the floors are at. Because in this house, for example, the main floor drops down in the living room. It goes down 2 feet, so there's kind of a sunken living room. Okay, let's take a look at sections, maybe. Let's do that in the junior high school. Something else when we talk about annotations that we should be aware of is just line weights and what are called detail components in Revit. So let me find us a section here. Let's do a wall section. So do you see in this wall section, we've cut through the wall and now we're trying to describe how it's built. Do you see how some lines are thicker than others? So the boundaries between the layers are thicker than the hatches inside the layers. And it makes the drawing feel nice and it gives it a little dimension. We often do this on exterior elevations as well. Parts of the building that are more towards your face have thicker line edges than the parts of the building that are back further away. It's a way of making a 2D drawing feel like it has a little bit of depth. And it's something that if you work for an architectural firm, they're going to be very particular about. And you can always tell good drafters from bad drafters by how they use line weights. So I think I mentioned briefly in another lecture or exercise that when you're cutting through something, it has a pretty thick line weight. And if you're not cutting through it, it will have a thinner line weight. And then it's the same thing. The closer something is, the thicker the weight. And then the further away, the thinner the line weight. So if you look through here, like for example here, you can see we're cutting through the window and the glass, so it's got a very heavy line. But right here and here, we're not cutting through the glass. What we're seeing are beyond where we're cutting, and you can see the edge of the window. So this is the side of the window, and this is the inside, and this is the side exterior. So that's, if you're a good drafter, you'll use line weights to your your advantage. So we'll talk a little bit about line weights today in this module about when we get into annotating things, right? So just keep that in mind when we talk about line weights. It's the thickness of the line. Then something else we might talk about are furnishings plans. Now, we're not going to talk about these so much just because, or we're not talking about these because they're regarding annotations, but I just want you to see what a furnishings plan is, because furnishings plans will be important to you as an interior designer. We've talked about floor plans, we've talked about even dimension plans, roof plans, but furnishings plans are basically a copy of the floor plan, but displaying different information. So if we go here, let's look at this furnishing plan. And here you'll see the interior designer is trying to show all of the floor patterns. It helps show size of the floor tiles. It helps show orientation of how they want them laid. There are different hatch patterns to indicate different colors. There's even these tags to indicate there's a transition between the two different floors. And she's calling out this type of floor on one side, and then there's a floor on the other side that she's calling out. And these typically correspond down here. If you go to the floors, you can see what F1.1 or 2 is. And then the contractor now knows what to put in there. In the classrooms, they're calling out what walls have accent colors on them. We have tags at the windows for the different shades that we're going to have them install. So really, the furnishings plans start to help the interior designer communicate things not about the building, like the floor plan and the dimension plans. They're talking more about the building as a whole. The furnishings plan is, how do you want to cover the inside of this building? What are we putting around the building? The other thing you'll find on a furnishings plan is a call out typically and a link to what's called an enlarged plan. So if I click here, it'll jump to this part of the set, the drawing set, where we have a call out of that room. So here's a typical classroom, and here's the enlarged floor plan. A lot of the same information is on this floor plan as was on the furnishings plan. But we've also added, you can now see the interior elevation tag. That wasn't on the previous view because there would be too many and it would start to muddle up the furnishings plan. So instead we put it on the enlarged plan. And then we make extra call outs here for all of the cabinetry, the marker boards, the TV, and the millwork. Everything gets called out here. And then you can see next to the floor, the enlarged plan is where we put the elevations, typically in a commercial project. So it's easy for someone to understand what we're doing. Here's the room in floor plan, and then here's what the room looks like if you stood and looked around at each wall. So then it's much easier for someone to know, okay, there's the windows, and here are the finishes. So this will call out the paint and the wall type and the baseboard, and so on and so forth. So hopefully this is starting to make sense. By the end of this class, I will expect you to be able to put together interior elevations and show the enlarged plan with the interior elevations. And then you should know what a furnishings plan is, because I will also expect you to show a furnishings plan. Another thing about furnishing plans is they often show the furniture in the room. In commercial, sorry, I'm trying to get back to the furnishings plan here. In a commercial project, the furnishings plan doesn't always show the furniture. For example, the classroom would have a bunch of desks in it. We don't show things on the furnishings plan unless we intend for them to be in the contract, meaning we expect the contractor to purchase and install the item. So because the school district will come in with their own chairs and put them in themselves, we don't bother to put that on the furnishings plan. But for example, the media center, let me see, or maybe even the gymnasium or the auditorium, we do show like the seating layout because we expect the contractor to install purchase and install all of those seats. Whereas in residential, most of the time, all of the interior design is not included in an architectural set. But if you're hired as an interior designer, you will add to the architectural set your sheets. So let's just look at my house plan. I did my own interior design sheets, and they're separate from the architectural sheets. And they start with an ID number, right? So I can go to my overall furnishings plan, and you can see it's showing the furniture, something that the floor plans didn't show. See, the floor plans have so much other information on them, it doesn't make sense to also try to show all the furniture. There's not room on the sheet. So instead, we separate it and we show it only on the furnishings plan. So now if I go to my furnishings plan, you can see, okay, here's the furniture, but also here are all the tags for the different rooms so that I can see the interior elevations. And then as I go through the rest of the set, here are my enlarged plans for the living room, and we even have reflected ceiling plans for some rooms to show what's happening up on the ceiling. Because in this particular house, the ceiling steps up 1.5 feet from the kitchen, then to the dining room, then to the living room. So it's getting taller. We also have some fake beams that we're putting in. And then the lights are being dimensioned. So whatever information you think the contractor needs to know in order to complete the design that you have envisioned, you need to put on a sheet. So the living room is big, so it takes up multiple sheets. So it's one sheet just for the ceiling and the enlarged plan. Then it's a whole nother sheet for the interior elevation plans. So here's the kitchen, dining, and living room from the side. Then here's the back of the living room. Here's the kitchen elevation. And then there's the other side of the room. And then down here, we elevate the island so that you can call out the different cabinet types. So here's a cabinet tag, and here's the dimensions. I'm trying to show you this so that you understand there's a lot of views involved, but there's also a lot of tags and text. So these are all annotations that we've put in order to communicate our design. And then if you go to this section, I like to do 3D perspectives to show the contractor what things are supposed to look like in 3D, and I'll even list some of the finishes. Now here's another sheet, and this room was small enough that we could get the enlarged plan and the ceiling plan all on one sheet, and along with all of its interior elevations. So here you see all the interior elevations at the top, and then the perspective here, and then a couple samples. And most of the rooms fit on one sheet. And some rooms are so small, like the bathroom, everything fits on half of a sheet. So we've got 2 bathrooms showing here. So here's the floor plan, or here's the ceiling plan, floor plan, all 4 elevations, a perspective, and then more information about all of the different materials that we're putting in that room. Okay, so I think we're at the end of this lecture. If you took anything away from it, it's simply that annotations are really important. The model alone is not enough. The sheets alone with views on it are not enough. You need to learn how to now take those views and add text and other annotation information in order to communicate your idea effectively to whoever's going to have to execute your idea.